Hey guys, welcome back to Magic TV. I have somebody very exciting that I'm going to be speaking to now. A person that I've interviewed before on the channel in the past, somebody who I consider to be the #1 expert in the world when it comes to playing card marking systems, graphic design for magicians, anything to do with that. This gentleman is an absolute legend, as well as being a super creative mentalist, magician, creator. He makes me sick. He's just awesome at everything. You know who I'm talking about, the one and only Phill Smith from Phill Smith Creative. How you doing, Phill?
I'm very good, thank you. Especially after that pretty overwhelming intro. It's all downhill from there, surely.
Oh, it's true. You make me feel so inadequate about myself because you do everything brilliantly. I'll come up with a great idea for a trick, and I'll say to you, "Hey, I've had this idea," and then you'll say, "Well, we could do this and this and this and this and this," and I'll be like, "Yeah, you've just made it so much better in 10 seconds." So,
well, thank you. Yeah, it's always good working with you, Craig.
but yeah, I wanted to get you on the channel, Phill, because there's a lot of projects that you have been working on, both yourself and also with other companies and with various different people.
Yeah.
And it feels like your whole thing has just blown up over the last couple of months. And I'm seeing everywhere people are talking about Phill Smith, about this project from Phill Smith, this thing from Phill Smith. And I thought this is a good time to bring you onto the channel and just get an update of where you are and what's happening with you, because I know you kind of changed gear a bit recently and you seem to be like really going 150% forward. So
Yeah. It's been the way that I work often is that I'm busy a lot of the time, but I can't show off what I'm working on. So some designers that you'll see who work in sort of the non-magic industry are quite happy to show the stuff that they're developing and the stuff that they're working on, because it doesn't necessarily have the sort of nature of secrecy that we do. But if I'm working on something for someone, if I'm working on a project for you, for example, I can't go on Instagram and post some like development pictures of us, because first of all, a lot of the time, the actual visuals of what it is kind of like tip a little bit too much of like how the method might work, for example, but also because we want to maintain and control the structure of when information is coming out and, so.
Well, the perfect example of that, so that people understand exactly what you're talking about, is Cube 52. That's out now. Everybody knows what Cube 52 is. It got launched. It was a huge success, but obviously you and I knew about that for 18 months previously.
Yeah. So it was just that was in the dark for a long time. And so there's other things. I mean, there's other things that we're working on that have lined up to come out. So you just teasing one the other day, but then there's also stuff that hasn't been teased yet. And then there's stuff that we're kind of at the beginning of the process of, or things that we're amending.
Yeah,
which I can't even mention. I've already said too much. So it's always sort of quite exciting. But what's happened recently is that there's been a bunch of things that I've worked on sort of for myself, for you, and for a few other people. And the actual release dates of them all kind of lined up a little bit. So it looks like I'm temporarily everywhere, but then I guess I'm going to disappear back into the darkness, like go underground again.
hilarious.
It's been good fun.
Well, I want to talk about all aspects of what you do and all aspects of Phill Smith Creative so that people can understand exactly what you do, because a lot of people, maybe they might be aware of a book that you've written, or they might be aware of a deck that you've been involved with, or this or that or the other. I don't think people fully understand the breadth of what you are involved in, and it's such an eclectic range of things, and how much of a secret keeper you are, because you're keeping secrets for everyone.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, I think what's happened is I've been involved in magic and mentalism for a long time, and I've been a sort of a commercial designer, and I've ended up, I think, being a bit of a sort of a go-to sort of computer nerd for a lot of people who are developing tricks. So, there's a lot of people out in the world who can drive a computer and use Illustrator and InDesign and all of this software, but there's not that many of them who you don't have to explain magic to. So, for example, if you came to me with a project like Cube 52,
Yep.
I understand what it is. So you don't have to go through the process of explaining the conceptual structure of a magic trick to like a designer who's a layperson. So I think that people quite like that I'm a bit of an insider, and that I'm going to understand what it is you're after.
You're almost playing yourself down a little bit there, because it's not just a case of we go to you and you understand what we're talking about. You are a creator, an author, an inventor, a performer in your own right. You know, I mean, you've created so much magic over the years and so much mentalism that in many times, at least when I've worked with you, and I think we're in the middle of working on our 5th and 6th project together at the moment or something like that. When I work with you, you will not just take the project on. You won't just say, okay, yeah, I can do that. You don't just understand it and then deliver exactly what I've asked for. You take it and you go, well, this is what you want, but have you thought about doing this and doing this and doing this? And that is something that a lot of people can't do. It's kind of almost like a triangle. You've got you as a creator, you've got you as a designer, and you've got you as a knowledgeable mentalist and magician. And it's kind of like the perfect trifecta. And the perfect example is the trick that I teased on Facebook the other day, which will be coming out in January through Murphy's. I came to you with the idea. You made it a million times better in so many different ways. But if you remember, you included one of your principles in there.
Yeah.
And you were like, why don't you do that? And I was like, I never thought of that. And you were like, well, I came up with this principle years ago. It'd be perfect for this. That's something that really I've never experienced with anybody else. It's not just you understand magic, but you create magic, and you can look at an idea and go, this is what I would do if, you know, to make it better. And I don't know anyone else that can do that.
It's very nice of you to say that. It's very nice. Yeah. I guess it's just a case of like having sort of been in the business for a long time, and I've been able to work with people who have a really good grasp of things like routining and you know, there's the structure of, you know, magic and magic products, and I've kind of managed to sort of combine a lot of those different ideas together, and I think that's pretty much what I try and bring to the table, really. But
Absolutely, and then some. So before we talk about all the different projects that you've got going on, let me ask you a question. I mentioned at the very beginning that you are, as far as I'm concerned, the foremost expert when it comes to marking systems, when it comes to decks. Like, there's nobody, and every time you come up with a deck, it's a completely different marking system. It's very unique for that thing. You look at Cube 52, for example. I came to you and I said, I need these cards marked to tell people the color on the face of the cards.
yeah.
And you came up with that wonderful design, very simple, but so easy to read from a mile off, and it's just hidden in plain sight. Then you look at the thing that's coming out in January, and it's a very complicated, not complicated for the end user, but very, how you came up with that, I don't know, because it's just, you created an entire alphabet system for that thing. Like, how do you approach, you know, if you have an idea for something, or you have a client comes to you and says, hey, I need a marking system. Does it stress you out? Like, oh my gosh, now.
No, I think I've got a bit of a process for that, and it's a combination of a few things from a long time ago. So I think this is going to sound, trust me, this is going to get there eventually. So I learned how to use Illustrator and the software to do graphic design. When I was a kid, my dad is a technical illustrator. So if you buy like a motorbike and you get the little handbook that comes with it, and it's got the little drawings that tell you how to change the brake fluid or something like that, he drew that drawing, and I learned how to do that when I was a kid. I've been using, I mean, you can look at that, you can see how old I am. I've been using Illustrator for something like 32, 33 years, back when it came on floppy disks. And so I learned this illustration style so that I could do work with him. And sometimes when you're working on these little tiny drawings, there'll be a detail that, you know, no one's going to be able to see, but it still needs there to be detail there. So I realized that instead of drawing all of the cables, I can see from your face, Craig, that you're wondering where this is going. Trust me, it's going somewhere.
Oh, no, I'm finding this fascinating. I really am.
When you zoom right in, like, and it's big on the screen, obviously you can see the details, but when it's printed small, it just needs something there. And I realized that if you kind of just did like a scribble, your eye would just be like, that's fine. I'm not going to look at it. It's just, you know, your eye, there's something there, and it'll look at the piece of the drawing that actually has the lid that needs to screw off, or the diagram, or whatever it is that you need to look at. It's possible when you're drawing something or creating a piece of artwork to have something where your eye will register that it's there, but kind of skate over it. And that's like the core of how I do the markings, is that it needs to be a certain amount of detail. It needs to have a kind of look where somebody will look at it, register that there's a design there, there's some detail there, but then just skate over it. So this thing that we worked on, so Cube 52, if people aren't familiar with it, the back is just, it's a 3D image of just loads of Rubik's cubes. And there's too much information. It's obvious what the picture is. It's just a load of Rubik's cubes. No one's going to sit and stare at that and examine and integrate every single one of them. You just look at it, go, it's a load of Rubik's cubes, I get it. So there's nothing there that's going to necessarily catch the eye. Whereas somebody who understands how the system works knows where to look to interrogate the image to be able to find out what the color is that's on the other side. And so with this thing that we've got coming up, that's coming out in January, which is going to smash, I reckon it's going to be great. There's text which is done in a very stylized way, but it's so stylized and integrated into the back of the artwork that people will look at it, just go, okay, I get it, it's just a pattern. And unless you know how to decode it, that's all it is. It's the same as the scribble with the drawing, with the motorbike. It's just this, you look at it and go, okay, there's just detail, that's fine, I don't need to look anymore. And the eyes will just skate over it. And it's a case of being able to calibrate the artwork so that there's enough detail that somebody who knows how it works can decode it and read it very quickly, but there's also not enough standout information that it will register with someone's eyes, that it is text, or that there's anything there for them to look at other than just a sort of randomized pattern. There you go. That's pretty in-depth, isn't it? I feel like
it is, and it's
there's
amazing.
about 8 people in the world who were like, finally, Phil's given his weird secret. Everyone else is like, this guy, got nothing to do with magic, drawing motorbikes.
It's fascinating because I've always struggled reading traditional marks. I just have. It's always something that I've always struggled with. My eyesight is terrible at the best of times, but I never have a problem reading a Phill Smith deck, no matter what the deck is. Like we've got, I think we can talk a little bit about it, not too much, but next year, early next year, there's a deck coming out with Penguin, and it's all based around Lego. And anybody who watched Ryland's America's Got Talent performance would have had a sneak peek of that deck. The marking system that you built into that, when you showed it me, I was like, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it, Phill. I can't see it. And then when you pointed out to me, you may as well have a card with just written in shot. Oh, from the other side of the room with my eyesight. And I'm like,
people are going to love that one as well. That's a real, that might be one of my favorite ones. I think it's such a weird sort of niche thing. And the way that that's because it's a kind of negative space thing. It's almost like it is itself an optical illusion. And there's something about that, kind of just like being able to see it. And the moment oh my God.
like that cigar, isn't it? With you remember years ago, that cigar on the bricks?
Oh yeah. When you see it, you see it. Yeah.
It's that, yeah.
We've had the elites the optical marking system decks at Blackpool, and one of my favorite things is to see people see it, and that there's an element of, people come up and it's marked and they can like look at it as closely as possible because they're looking for an extra mark. They're looking for something added on, like on a like the Penguin mark deck has got the actual text written on it. And they're looking for that, but of course there's nothing there to see. And then when they see it, it's almost like a little magic trick for themselves. And I think that that's part of the success for it. And I think that that's definitely the way that Lego project, the way that it works is that because you're looking at one thing, you're never going to see it. The more you try and decode that one thing, the further you get into not seeing it, until there's like a paradigm shift, the context changes and you realize that it's all there. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I am actually I'd forgotten about that. It's one of my favorite things that we worked on.
Yeah, I'm so excited about that. But you mentioned the optical marking system. I think for a long while, your name became synonymous with that, because I think that pretty much it is considered to be the best marking system for playing cards. What made you go down the route of what, like, how did you kind of develop that? What made you want to actually create because for people that haven't seen the optical marking system, like Phill said, it is completely different to anything else out there. Every, pretty much every other mark deck I've seen, it's written in text. Penguin mark deck, Night Flight. With this, you look at it and there's nothing to see. But then when you see it, you just can't unsee it. It's amazing.
The sort of the very early origins of that is the first project that I did that was kind of like a mark deck was a thing I did called the Creative Solutions deck, which had, I guess, like a really, really sort of early proto version of the OMS on it. with the back pattern. This is where I first started exploring that, and it was like a mentalism thing that I did on Kickstarter. And I think that, you know, I've been involved in mentalism. That's my sort of main thing for a long time. So quite a few people sort of in the mentalism world maybe are familiar with my books and tricks and stuff like that. But the elites and the optical marking system is kind of the most general thing that I've worked on in Magic. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why a lot of people know me, is because they don't really care about mentalism, but it's so applicable and so sort of useful. And it's also useful for people who don't really think about themselves of using marked decks, because it's so easy to use. I know people who use their OMS decks just for doing normal tricks, but so that at the point when they've got like the 4 piles laid out, they can just see whether the aces are on top or whether it's gone wrong or something before you know, flip the cards over and, oh, actually, this hasn't quite worked. So you can get ahead of it, make sure everything's worked. I need that. I'm not, you know, anybody who sat and watched me perform knows that the full Phill Smith experience is that one thing has to go slightly wrong. So I always like using things like that try and like get me out of jail free card kind of thing.
Yeah, and so you develop the optical marking system, and that kind of almost brings us up to date in terms of you've now bought out the you've now taken the optical marking system, and you've now launched a brand new deck of cards, which is called the Elysian Duets.
That's it.
Which integrates a new version of the optical marking system and also incorporates just so much stuff into this deck. What was it hard, because this is kind of your new deck that you've just launched?
Yeah.
Was it hard to decide what to put in there, what not to put?
It's been in like I said, in development for a very long time. Probably, you know, been working on the OMS and the elites and various projects for probably like 10 years. So it's been gradually developing and being redrawn and getting more complex. But we started working on the duets about a year and a bit ago. And the mindset that I've tried to have with it is not necessarily just to make the best mark deck, because I'm satisfied that the OMS is, for a lot of people, you know, it's not necessarily the best. It's just personal preference, but it's very usable, and it's sort of immediately accessible. But what would the best deck, and it's a lofty goal, but what's the best deck for performing card magic? What would it look like? What would it feel like? What can we add that's going to making, you know, performing strong card magic like easy and accessible? So, like, you know, like I said, like I'm not always ultimately successful. I've ended up being in an industry that I don't particularly excel at in terms of performance. I'm a pretty good performer, but I'm not you know, a seasoned pro at it. And like I said, every now and then I need a little bit of extra help. And I love coming up with routines. So we just wanted to make sure that there was lots of tools in there for everybody to use. So we've integrated sort of stack markings using mnemonica, which is something that was in the V5 elites. But we sort of reworked them so that they're slightly easier to access, and added in the marks for the cards above and below. Now, and people who use mnemonica extensively and stack decks extensively, well, like, you know, why have you done that? Because if you know the stack, you know the stack. But if you're not a full-time professional performer who uses mnemonica, then maintaining mnemonica mentally at a level that is actually going to fool anybody is quite a challenge. So, like, you can learn it, and there's loads of great resources out there to do that. Like Rick Lax has got that video, I think, that's on Penguin, just brilliant mnemonics to work through how to remember it, and you can learn it. But like 4 months later, if someone's like, "Show me a card trick," you might remember it, but you don't. You need to be like, you know,
it needs to be instant recall.
There needs to be no mnemonic process. You need to just know it.
Well, from my point of view, very quickly, I'll tell you, I've released a project on mnemonica and memorized decks through the 1914.
Oh yeah,
and I know mnemonica inside out and back to front. You tell me a number, I'll tell you the card straight away. I've been using the Elysian Duets now for probably about a week and a half. I've taken them out to about 10 gigs, like every night this last week and a half. And I've found myself looking more at the mark that tells you the bottom card than the mark at the top left that tells you the card that they're looking at. Because a lot of the time with the routines I do, I want to know the bottom card. Now, I could look at the other card and then just go backwards one. But what I love about this is I can get that information straight away. I don't have to think. Even if I've got instant recall, if I see Jack of Hearts, and I'm like, okay, so that's 20, so I need to add one on. Okay, that would be the three of spades. Whilst with your deck, I immediately can get that information just by knowing where on the deck that I need to look.
Yeah, I think that I mean the layperson's experience of a trick that you're doing doesn't involve or include the method that you use to get. So, like, if they don't know or care how you've done something, only that it needs to feel like there's no explanation for it. Yeah. So as far as for my own personal performance style, the more I can, not have to worry about how a trick is going to work, the more I can focus on my interaction with the spectator and sort of building the moment for them and thinking about it from their point of view. So that's why we sort of like trying to put these things in to make them easier. Like we put a one-way system in that's easier, we're trying to constantly think of things that are easier. We added a double backer in because there's some things that you can do with that are easier than using pure sleight of hand.
Yeah.
Or like there's an effect that you can use with the marks and the double backer that's actually very similar to an invisible deck. It's a very similar kind of outcome. But you don't need to carry an extra deck around. It's easier because you don't have to ring a deck in and out. So by using the double backer, you're almost sort of simplifying it to the point where you don't need to do a deck switch. Like deck switches are incredible and I love them, but it's about that, like trying to streamline things and make it as easy as possible for people so that this stuff is accessible. And a few people have got the hump about the way that it's expressed. And I think that it might be because they don't like the fact that people who don't have the time or inclination to fully learn mnemonica to a very high standard can kind of do those tricks now. They don't have to learn that. If you've spent like 5 or 6 years learning mnemonica and somebody comes along and they've got this thing and they can do the same thing you can do slightly faster, I'd get the hump.
And the other thing, I've lectured on mnemonica and I've actually done workshops on how to memorize decks. And from speaking to people, the big thing that people are concerned about more than anything else is they've got it. They've got the stack in their head. They're going to go out and they're going to do it to a live audience. What happens if I forget? What happens if something happens on the heat of the moment and I just forget? Oh my gosh, I've seen 30. What's 30? I don't know. Oh, is it the 5 of clubs or the 5 of spades? I can't remember. With this, you're never going to have that concern. It gives people more confidence to go out and learn mnemonica and get better at it because
it's kind of training wheels kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the training wheels.
Even if nothing else, I know a couple of people who use mnemonica, but because it's got the stack numbers on the back, it's super easy to put back in order. Like even just that, like, there's something hopefully that people are going to find useful in that.
What made you actually, on the subject of memdex, what made you go? Because I know initially you gave me a very early prototype and it was in Aronson. And I said to you, this deck is amazing, but I don't do Aronson. I'm just confused. Like, what made you go down the route of mnemonica instead of Aronson stack?
Well, what you've just mentioned is part of our process is that, we've been developing these decks for quite a long time. We just speak to a lot of people who use them, and so gradually each deck has had small improvements made and small refinements, and part of it has basically been from talking to people that we want to get feedback and we want to produce something that's as useful as possible. So it's not just like me out there on my own coming up with something that works for me, but it's something that as many people as possible can find useful. And that's why we sent out those prototype decks. I did like an initial design for the deck, came up with as much as possible, printed like 30 of them, which was a pain in the neck. And you can imagine that printing 30 decks is not the cheapest. Then sent them out to people whose opinions we valued, and I sent one to you as well. And sorry. But we got some feedback from people, and but the feedback that we got from, I put Aronson in there because when we've done the elites, we did the V5s, which had the mnemonica markings, and a few people said, oh, you should do Aronson. So I was like, oh, okay. So we sent out these 30 decks to various people. Literally every single person that we sent them to was like, oh, Aronson, you should do it in mnemonica. And so even though I quite like that, Aronson has got more tricks built into it from the get-go. Mm-hmm. And so part of me was like, well, we should do that. We should use that because it's more sort of structurally useful. but I mean, how churlish would it be for me to send out all of these decks from people to try and get some feedback and get absolutely universal feedback from everybody, and then go, nah. So, you know, people that I consider to be extremely knowledgeable, not just about performance of Magic, but also the industry and how, you know, more people are going to find it useful, said you should do mnemonica. So, you know, you mentioned that I'm like the guy who knows about marking systems. I'm pretty good at making them. The person who knows the most about them is Kevin Rayleck, who's this fellow that was working at Penguin, who I need to reply to an email that he's copied us both into.
Going back and forth with us at the moment, isn't he?
But he said you should do it in mnemonica. Literally, that was it. If Kevin says I should do it in mnemonica, you know, he knows what he's talking about. And so part of it was about that, finding out from people what they wanted to do, what they thought was best. You notice that there's certain details about the faces and the design of the original deck that I sent out to you that have changed since we sent those out. And it was, you know, it's a pain in the neck to do that because I had to almost completely redesign the whole thing. But it means that we can hit the ground with a deck that is almost in its second version, because I've asked a load of people whose opinions I value. And that's, you know, it's very lucky to be in a position to do that with a Magic project, because I think quite a few of them, like in the industry, people will release something and then that's it. If it's not right, it's not, you know, but we've been able to cycle back round.
And what's your plans with the Elysian duets? Because I know with DMCs, you talked about V5s, V4s, this. It just continued to evolve over time, and you had gaff decks and all sorts of things. Is this kind of the plan moving forward with the Elysian duets? Are you going to be?
Yeah, the obviously we've got a lot of work still to do with the first chapter. That's what we called it, like chapter 1 on this duet. So it's kind of the first iteration of them. And we've got the, instead of doing like all loads of weird colorways, we've got red and blue, which is what people asked for, which people most want from previous decks that we've done. But the kind of the plan with it is to be that the like Elysian part of the name is the platform. So it's almost like, if you can imagine that deck, some people have asked about, could we do an ESP deck is a question that we've had a long time about, using the OMS on something like that. So it would be like the equivalent like of the Elysian ESP, or whatever else people are after. That's something that we're going to be able to use down the line. So it's going to be a consistent kind of format. We'll be able to apply this kind of thinking to make them as, you know, as flexible and useful as possible. I think that there's a way to do that with ESP deck or whatever it's going to be. Although I know that's a lot more sort of niche. But that's the idea with that. And eventually, you know, once we have got enough feedback, and if there's a consistent drive to, people should say like, oh, why don't you do this? If enough people say that, that's kind of our MO. That's how we'll figure out a way to do it. Hopefully, that was kind of how it's always gone.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And then, right, I want to talk about some of the other stuff that you've got coming out or have just come out. But before we do, let me just cycle back to what I mentioned earlier on. Obviously, the Elysian duets is from Phill Smith Creative. This is your thing. And we've also talked about how you and I have worked together. So if somebody is watching this, because you work with Penguin, you work with Murphy's, you mentioned Kevin there. I think you work with almost every major Magic company that there is out there. You know, it's like, you want something doing, you go to Phill Smith. That's just the way it is. But if somebody who is wanting to develop a trick or wanting to develop a product, and then wanting to work with somebody who will totally get their vision, like you and I have many, many times, how would they go about getting in touch with you? How would that process work? How can somebody become a client of yours?
Pretty much the same way as you would get with any commercial designer, is that you've got to send me an email and hire me. So I've worked with Penguin and Murphy's. Sometimes what will happen is that they'll be working with a creator who has an idea of how something's going to go, and they will sort of commission me to do the work for that. Sometimes there's projects that are, you know, someone will just hire me directly. So coming out for Blackpool, there's something that I've been working on with the Italian guy, mentalist Luca Volpe, who's a friend of mine going back. We've got this thing coming out that is it's not mine. It's not a Phill Smith project, but it's got some of the things that we've talked about in terms of integrating, some ideas together. And it's been great to bring his idea to life and find a way to create something that's compatible with his performance style and his whole, persona. But it's it's a long process, and it's about sort of finding the right project. I can't work on everything because I've got a stack of stuff going on.
And I think people realize that just from not just working with you, but creating anything, if it needs to be done right, it can take time. Like I said, we're working on 2 things at the moment, and it's just like everything else we've worked on. It's taken time, but that's because it needs to be perfect. And I think that's the biggest frustration for new creators. They don't realize how slow the industry moves. And
Craig, is this your roundabout way of saying that it's taken too long?
No,
because it has taken a little bit too long. I can't believe you called me out on an interview like that.
No, not at all.
It's underway, trust me.
No. For me, it's like, I've said this to anybody who would listen. I would rather wait 2 years and have Phill Smith do it than have it in 2 months and have anybody else in the world do it, because the bottom line is I mean what I say. I think that you're just the best. There's nobody that's better, which is why whenever I have an idea, I go immediately to you. It's like, I don't even go to the magic companies these days. I'm just going to hire you direct, get it done, and then I'll speak to the magic companies, because I just know that you get what I'm trying to do and you understand it, and it's just going to be absolutely perfect. The point I was trying to make is that if you're a new creator, it can be very frustrating. A lot of people think, oh, I've had an idea, it's going to be on the shelf in a month's time.
Yeah, I think the reality of it is that people have an impression of how things work because a lot of the time they don't see the development. Like I said, we keep a lot of the development stuff in the dark. If I said, like, at the beginning of this project that we were talking about, this sort of Lego thing, if at the very beginning of that we'd have teased it, then like a year and a half later, it had come to fruition and people had seen it. Perhaps that's how people will begin to realize that it's not just sort of fallen out of the sky. It's something that like a lot of time has gone into. And yeah, I think you're right. I'm lucky enough to have worked on a lot of really cool projects and a lot of really interesting sort of projects and tricks and branding and stuff. And I think that often it's because smaller projects, people like they can't justify hiring me for. It's only things that they're really proud of, that they really feel like it needs to be expressed. So it's all worked out like that. So, but like you said, what you're getting is something that takes a while to sort of conceive and develop the workflow for. And like this thing that we're working on at the moment, that's, like I mentioned, that's taking a little bit longer than I had hoped it to, is partly because I think what we're doing is kind of quite ambitious in a way, and it's about being able to figure out not just doing it, but doing the project involves developing a workflow to do the project so that it's reproducible, the style is consistent across everything. This is going to make sense in 2 years when it comes up. But and we've had to with something else that we're working on at the moment, kind of go back and retool it slightly.
Oh, there's one thing that we're working on. We've literally had to go back to the beginning with it.
But it would have been a nightmare to do that if we hadn't, like working together, we hadn't sort of constructed a way of doing it.
Yeah.
And it's that, like, being able to go back and use this like machinery of producing the trick and plugging new information in.
Yeah.
But this is like literally just me and you. Understand what we're talking about? Everyone else just pretend like we're saying something sage and intelligent and applicable and useful.
It's very funny, but it's very true. But no, you're right. You can't rush perfection. You really can't, and you can't. You can't especially when you're working with decks of cards. Once you pull that plug and you've produced them, if it's not perfect, there's nothing you can do.
I think that part of the process, though, is understanding that there's always going to be a couple of things that are not 100% perfect. And the goal should be to have something that people are engaged with enough that if you need to go back and make a change to, then that's the. So if the, with like my duets, for example, just because I've been across the whole thing, if I had waited for that to be perfect, it would never come out. I think that they're really good. I think they're great. But there is a mistake in there that you called me up and pointed out to me the other day, which is because we did the original deck in Aronson, the instruction card has got a key and it says just one word, very, very small. That's no bearing on the trick at all whatsoever or how it works. And it says Aronson instead of mnemonica, which I was just like, I was so annoyed about. But rather than getting super upset about it, I've made the changes. The change on the artwork has already changed. And then if we get to the point where we're going to do a second printing of it, it'll be correct. So I think what's the phrase is perfection is the enemy of the great. That like if you're constantly striving for perfection, you know, there's like you said, there's got to be a point where you say, you know, F it, let's just press print, publish and be damned. And then and that's part of the process, I think, of understanding that the first thing isn't always going to be perfect. And maybe that's something that new creators want to think about, is that their first release probably isn't going to be like a perfect or a big hit. And that the people that you see like in the industry who are producing stuff that is consistently good, I probably, if you rewind to the beginning of their process, there's some stuff that sucks, you know, but you just don't know about it. I watched a thing recently on YouTube, and it was about things that Apple Computer had made that were huge failures. And no one really thinks about them because the things that they made that were huge successes are like occlude everything else and cover them up. And they just quietly pull the speakers or I mean, they used to make a digital camera back in the day. Who knows that? Or like their printer range or all of these kind of things. Like no one knows about those because they don't trumpet them. They trumpet their triumphs, you know. So things that, you know, I've done or you've done that weren't a massive hit first time, just quietly just brush them under the rug. Like focus on the other things instead.
I completely agree. But then on top of all of the, you know, we've talked about you assisting creators in magic, but the other thing that you do is if somebody's, you work a lot with people that are maybe putting an act together for television. So something that I can talk about is Ryland in his audition when he had all of the when he had all of the drawings and he had the word scam.
Yeah.
It's all you. When we had the semi-final and we had all of the pictures of coming together, your principle that you created for that, the fusion mosaic principle, which we're going to talk about more obviously in a second, that was all you as well. And it was wonderful to be able to turn around to you and say, Phill, can we do this? And you were like, of course we can,
we'll figure it out. Yeah, no, I've managed to, I've been lucky enough to work with a few people on some projects like that. I've done a few things with James Piper, who is a magician from Wales who performs with his son. We did some really interesting sort of visual stuff that was good fun, that worked nicely with him. Things that I've worked on with you and Ryland. I always point there because it's up there. It's on my wall. The thing is there. And again, I think it's just a case of having people who are sort of in the know, having seen some of the things that you've done. I did a piece of some graphics for, oh God, this is medium embarrassing because I worked with Brent Braun, who runs a company in the States that consults with people on Foolus and AGT. And he'd worked with Dustin Tavella, who was the winner of AGT, who was doing an AGT live in Las Vegas. And he wanted some graphics doing for that, for a reveal that was I think maybe almost a very early proto version of the fusion mosaic phenomenon that used in the thing that I did with you. So it's I think a case of sort of knowing people, and again, like you said, people being able to trust after a while that you kind of get what it is that they're after. And even just like people that I know who are doing projects like that will maybe just contact me and run like the script by me, or just talk about what the sort of feel is that they want for it. No, and it's not something that, like, you know, like Brent with his the magic firm, that's kind of his thing, is doing these consulting, whereas it's just something that sort of ended up happening with me from a few different things. And a case of, like I said, just a case of knowing people. And just that, I think when they think I need some design, and literally the first name they come up with is mine. It's not necessarily the best, but I am the one that they remember. I'm the one they think of. So, and it kind of just a case of, I did some work with Colin Cloud quite a long time ago, because when he did his book Divine, I designed that. And I did, when he was doing Edinburgh Festival many moons ago, I did some branding design for it. And more recently, when lockdown happened and people were doing live shows, he wanted me to do some branding for that. And I was like, do you know what? I'm working on something at the moment. And the graphic that I did for him, I offered to do like an animated version of, just as a proof of concept, because I was learning the software to do it. And then later down the line, he's working with Shin Lim at Limitless in Las Vegas. And they were retooling that because of some changes that had meant that they needed to rejig it to fit the new theatre or something. And they needed some motion graphics to it to go on the big screens at the back. And the first two people that they had to try and do it had kind of bailed out. And so because I'd done this animation for Colin, he was like, oh, I wonder if Phill can do it. So I ended up doing that, not because I'm like the best guy in the world for doing it, just because of this sort of weird connection that I'd made over having been like in the business for a while. That was great. We went to, so if you see Limitless in Las Vegas, all of the animations that are on the backs of the screens and on the side screens is stuff that I came up with working with Shin Lim, but specifically with Casey, his wife. And when we went to Magic Live last time in Vegas, me and Roxana went and saw it, and I was like the whole time, I was like, oh, I did that graphic. I did that. no one cares. I care. It's great to be sort of like a behind the scenes kind of part of things like that. You know, watching Ryland on TV, he killed it. And knowing that there's some small part of that process that I was sort of involved with, or helped to. Sometimes, you know, when you make magic, you are making moments for people with their audiences. You know that, like when you perform. When you develop the tricks that you work on, the real sort of delight is knowing that somebody has learned that, and then they've had a great moment at a gig or performing for their friends, or like they're the cool uncle and they're just like, let me show you this, and they've created this cool moment. But knowing that you've been a part of creating that cool moment, not just for the people who are in the audience watching AGT, but you know, for Ryland, he's worked so hard to be able to be there and be in that position. And maybe some part of it was slightly easier because he knows that this thing is going to work because someone's taken care of it, or that kind of thing. That's why I love doing that, and I always try and keep sight of that. What we're doing is giving people the opportunity to have these moments. I did we've got the release of this Fusion Mosaic phenomenon, which is this sort of playing card version of this trick that work with for Ryland and you.
Let's talk about that, because that's obviously just come out, and this is the perfect segue into it, because obviously it was working on Ryland's acts that kind of made you then move in this direction.
Yeah,
the deck, and the deck is brilliant. It's good. It's so good. It gives, you know, I remember when I went to you and I said, I'd like Ryland to do this, and I was just like, can we do this? And you were like, do what you always do, leave it with me, let me see. And then you came up with a way. When I perform Fusion Mosaic Phenomenon, it makes me feel the same way as it did watching Ryland do that on stage. It's such an incredible moment where everything comes together and they don't realize, it's so good.
Well, I got, like, this is what I was thinking about, is I got an email from somebody a couple of days ago who had, you know, they got it out, like learned the trick as quickly as possible, because there's a very simple way of performing it. You know, it's mainly self-working, or it can be as complicated as you like. And he performed it for his daughter. And anybody who's, you know, all the magicians watching this know that their families are a little bit, they've got magic fatigue. And he said that her response to it was so sort of electric and different from other things that he performed, because it was, I guess, because it's slightly different. It just comes at things from a different direction. And that kind of made my day, because he'd managed to have this moment. He wanted to do this creative thing. He'd come up with his own way of doing it that he was proud of, and he wanted to show his daughter something, and they had this cool moment, and hopefully that's the. I don't know. It sounds like I'm being churlish about it. It's just I do think about those things quite a lot. I love performing, and I love having those moments. And everyone who's watching this knows what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
When there's a connection, and people are like, there's this electric moment of excitement at the end of a card trick, or when they open their hands and there's a million sponge balls there or something like that. And we love that. That's why we do it. And being able to construct things where they're sort of people are able to feel connected.
And I think, honestly, the end reveal for the fusion mosaic phenomenon, it reminds me a little bit of a sponge ball type moments. The reason magicians love that sponge balls moment is because there's something, they are aware of one ball.
Yeah.
They are convinced they're holding one ball. They open up their hand, there's 2 balls, there's 3 balls, there's 4 balls, whatever. With this, they've seen a bunch of individual photos. They're just pictures. From their point of view, you got the trick wrong. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And then when there's a moment where they kind of just go, what? And when it all comes together, it's just such a great moment that everything can be laid out, everything can be there, and they don't even realize.
Yeah, you can get into the final stage and it's completely sort of invisible. Yeah, there is something about that. Like, I mean, that's the trick, isn't it? That moment of revelation and the realization that there's this sort of second layer or something going on. I'm a big believer in. I think it was Joshua J did a project where he was invited to participate in some scientific research into what people value and find interesting about magic and how it kind of works. And they did a lot of surveys with lay people, what people liked most about magic. And he said going into it, his expectation was that it would be the not knowing and the mystery of magic that people found most sort of value in. But it was a surprise. It was when they asked people, what do you like about magic? The thing that most people said or they valued most highly about magic is surprise. And that's the moment with the sponge balls. And I try and build my routines so that there is an element of surprise. Even like if you're doing a mind reading, you write something down, concentrate on it. I'm going to see if I can work out what it is. There's not a huge amount of surprise beyond their surprise that it's possible to do at all. But if you can construct it so that there is some aspect of surprise, the revelation is surprising in some way. And I think that that's the essence of the reveal in the fusion mosaic phenomenon, is that you've shown them everything. There's nothing there. And the surprise is that I guess that there is, that it comes together in this very specific way. And it is, I think it's quite surprising. It's extremely weird. And it's not something that could have existed more than a few years ago because it's so reliant on sort of current graphics technology to pull together.
And I'll never forget when you sent me the prototype deck and there was no packaging, there was no nothing. It was just... And you said, hey, I'm sending you something, have a look at it. And I knew it was... Me and Ryland sat there for about an hour looking at the backs of the cards, trying to work out the marking system because you told us there was one. And we just couldn't see it. Like we were there, both of us, looking for marks. And it was when we had to ring you up and go, is there a marking system on this? And you were like, look here. And we were like, what? Yeah. It's another example of how you've built a marking system into a deck of cards. Well, not even a deck of cards, a deck that's, and it's just there. And you just you can't see it. But when you see it,
that was a fun one to do. I mean, what's fun about that is you don't really need the markings to do the trick. It's not 100% reliant on that at all. It's just it gives you more options in terms of how to do the reveals. One of the things that I thought was quite interesting about the sample version that I sent to you was that I'd obviously got a few of them and I'd figured out this because I obviously know it's possible to make this mosaic using this technology. And I started working out my own routining for it. And I sent you a sample deck, and you said, you'd put a routine together, and almost every part of how you do the routine is kind of the exact opposite of how I do it. And it's just 2 different routes to get to the same kind of end result. Mm. And that's why I think it's worth sometimes with the projects that we've done previously that you put a lot of different pieces in, because rather than coming out and being like, this is the trick, here is how it works this one way, and if you don't do it like that, it won't work. To be able to create instead like a toolkit so that somebody can be like, okay, I like the way that Phill does it, but that's not exactly how I would do it. So I'm going to do it my way. So I showed it to like John Carey, for example, And the way that he would like to do it, we talked about doing, and I've included some instructions for this in the instructions, is as a packet trick. That you actually, rather than having all of the different sets and performing with the full deck, there's a really, really streamlined way of doing it where you've just got 10 cards in your wallet. And you get you get to the end.
I would expect nothing less from John. He's a smart cookie, John Carey.
Yeah, and again, because he's got that the way of seeing, magic that is very quite different from me, different from you, and probably most people. He can just sort of boil things down to their essence, and that was kind of what it was. That he's like, what's the most streamlined way of getting to that end result? And that's why, like I said, I like coming up with things like with the duets where there's loads of different options with, that's why you feel the same way. That's why the instructions for Cube 52 were 8 days long, because it's a toolkit. It's a toolkit to come up with all of these different things. We put stuff in there that have got nothing to do with the trick, but because what we do is an art, and people want to be able to express themselves using the tools that we create. So if you don't make a paintbrush that can only paint one thing, you give them the paintbrush. There you go. Here's some oil paints. Paint what you want.
Yeah.
Within that, so that's the mindset. That's the beauty of the sort of way of attacking things, I think. Does that make sense? That's pretty nebulous, isn't it?
It does. No, it really does. And you know what? I want to touch on one more thing with that as well, that you've always done, and it's this attention to detail that I think is just, you go to a normal designer and you say, design me a deck of cards, they might do, but you think about every single aspect. So right down to the tuck case. I mean, you look at the Cube 52 deck, it looks like a deck of cards that we bought by speed cubers. You look at the box for Fusion Mosaic Phenomenon, the new thing that we've teased about in January, the box, that is just perfect. It's just, it's these little attention to details where it doesn't look like, oh, he's bringing out a specially printed deck of photos or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
This could be bought in a shop.
I think I'm trying to remember what the phrase was. I was talking to somebody about this recently. It's this so like, it's almost like an in-universe thing. It's like like the disguise for the deck. Because when you're performing with the Cube 52 cards, somebody's going to be looking at them and they're just in the back of their mind, they'll be like, what is that? What are these cards? And you're a magician doing some magic. So it's completely reasonable for them to correctly think that these cards are something that you bought from a magic shop for doing magic with. And unfortunately, because the cards themselves do bear some of the weight of the trick, you don't really want them to think that. You want all of the focus to be on what you're doing and the magic. So you don't even have to explain what they are. If you take the box out and people can see all of the detail that's on there that says that it's, like a speed cube challenge deck, it kind of precludes their concern about it. They'll look at it and go, okay, that's what it is. Just a one line of text with I've got the tuck box for the Fusion Mosaic Phenomenon. All of it is about, it's a deck of cards that I got from a photography exhibition. And so it's got all of the details that you would expect for a merchandise deck from a photography exhibition. And that's it. That, I guess by the end of the trick, when people see it, they'll go, this is a magic trick. I like, it's so specific. But you've got there, it provides that level of distraction and that sort of belief that that's what it is. And I quite like to think about that. We always try and, when there's a prop that I'm bringing into a trick, just like, what is this? What are these? What is this? We've got like a trick.
The perfect example is a trick that you brought out that Ryland does in every close-up gig that he does. He takes it with him. Is it the thrift box? It's perfect because it's a game and he's a kid. Yeah. Makes sense, and he loves that trick. But the whole presentation of that, it's so believable that it's what it's meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate, I think, expression of that, because the whole trick is about that it is this thing, rather than just like getting it out of the way with. You invite them into this universe where you yourself are also sort of perplexed and confused as to why this thing works, and like no one knows how it works. I think that's one of my favorite tricks. I think that's probably one of the most sort of Phill Smith tricks. It's all narrative. It's got quite an interesting sort of method that's been streamlined and simplified. Yeah. But does he do that a lot? I love that
Yeah.
trick. I'm really chuffed that
Every
he does
close-up
that.
job, he's got a little close-up case that he takes for every close, and that's in there, like
Oh
every
wow,
single gig. Yeah, he loves that trick. It's one of his favorites.
that's cool. I really like that. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to demo as well, because it's got the method. I think magicians see it, and it kind of feels like one of those sort of self-working-y, Max Maven-y, video mindy kind of things. And then when you get to the end, it's not. And there's this. I've done it so many times at Blackpool. People are like, "Wait, what?" And I've got him.
Exactly.
Fun.
It's amazing. So, obviously, Fusion Mosaic Phenomenon and the Elysian duets are now available.
Yes.
And there's going to be lots of other stuff that's going to be coming out in 2024 from various different people that you've been working with. Is there anything else in the next few months that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, we've got something that I've been like chewing over for quite a long time is a redesign and a redevelopment of a trick we did called EDC dice, which is a weird little sort of piece using some peculiar dice. And again, we've redesigned the trick and the method based on feedback from Luca Volpe. Actually, was one of the sort of instigators of the change that we've made to make it easier, more streamlined, faster to perform. And again, we've sort of gone back and redesigned sort of the, like I said, the in-universe disguise for the trick, and that's going to be integrated a little bit more into it. So that's going to be coming out hopefully for Blackpool. And then a few other mysterious and exciting things. Yeah, the other thing that we did recently was the Elder deck that I worked on with my friend John Watson. So that's I
haven't seen this, but I've heard a lot of buzz about it.
But it's a deck of well, it's John's design. I just like kicked it a little bit so that it was as shiny as possible, and then helped him with the print for it in the Kickstarter. But it's a deck of cards with Nordic runes on for doing rune readings, and it's marked on the back using a sort of development of a system that I developed that John sort of reworked, and then I tidied up again a little bit so it can tell you what the card is and what the runes are. And it's really good and really fun. John came up in the shed and we did an instruction video on how to use the deck for doing tricks, how he uses it in his performance, and how to do readings with it, which in my mind it might have been the most ramshackle set of instructions that anyone's ever done, but we've had loads of really positive comments about it. So maybe that's the future, is doing just like tricks that slightly fall apart but that are funny. Anyway, there you go.
And you've mentioned several times Blackpool, so you're going to be at Blackpool.
Yeah, we basically, because we've been dark over the last year, we actually didn't go to Blackpool and trade last year because we've just everything that we've got that was new was just in development. We hadn't got anything to bring to the table, and I didn't really like going there just to go there to, have the same stuff that we had last time. It's always nice to go there with something new and something interesting that people haven't seen before. So we've got a bunch of new stuff. We're definitely going to be there upstairs with the chairs in the dealers hall next year. I'm really looking forward to it. And not only that, but there's other things that I've worked on, like this thing with Luca Volpe, who I think is it, I don't know if it's a secret. He's doing a lecture at Blackpool, and he's going to be releasing this new thing that he's worked on that's going to be really cool. So that'll be interesting to see that come to life. It'll be the first time that we've put the Fusion Mosaic Phenomenon, like demoed it. I'm really excited to see people see that. The duets, people are more familiar now than they were before with the OMS decks, but there's still stuff that you can do with it that I think you can. I love coming up with tricks where you can fool somebody who knows that it's a marked deck.
Yeah.
You've just got them. There's lots of ways of attacking that. So I'm really looking forward to Blackpool. Me and Roxana and the team are going to be there. So I'll hopefully be able to see everybody there when it comes.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So if people want to not wait till Blackpool, or they're not going to Blackpool, and they want to buy anything that we've talked about here, the Fusion Mosaic Phenomenon, the Elysian duets, obviously, we talked about the thrift store, but there's a bunch of other stuff on your website as well. The best place to go is phillsmithcreative.com.
That's it, phillsmithcreative.com. Phill with 2 L's, smithcreative.com. I know how the world works. That shipping at the moment internationally is a bit of a pain in the neck. So a lot of this stuff is available through dealers who work with Murphy's, for example. So the Elysian duets. If there's a dealer that you usually buy from, try them. If you're not happy with the shipping from the UK, and if they don't stock them, then just grief them until they order them from Murphy's, because that works out fine for me as well.
Will the phenomenon, Fusion Mosaic phenomenon, be going through Murphy's, or is that
no one's? We've not started talking to any dealers about the Fusion Mosaic phenomenon yet. That is exclusive from Phil Smith Creative. Oh no, we have one dealer is registered their interest, and that will be at some point soon. But that's just us at the moment. We'll figure that out. I'll probably, if people follow me on Instagram, we try and, when somebody starts stocking our stuff, we usually try and post up about it. So, yeah,
that's amazing. That's super exciting. You know, I have to tell you, this has been an amazing interview. You're welcome on this channel anytime. And I've said it, I shout it from the rooftops, but you're my favorite person to work with. Honestly, I would give up everything else I do and just work on projects with you 24/7 if I could, because you just get it, Phill, and you're just so amazing at what you do. So
that's unbelievably kind of you to say, Craig, and I really do appreciate it. I always enjoy working with you on your projects, I think, because you've got a sort of, like I said, a routining sense that I really like. I mean, I always try to talk about it because I don't want to like steal all the credit. The actual structural concept of the Fusion Mosaic phenomenon deck, you sort of were pushing me. You were like, Phill, do a deck. You should do a deck of this. When we were working on the thing for AGT, you should do a deck for this. And I was like, yeah, because I know that coming up with these things and doing the construction and the idea for it is very time consuming. I was working on a bunch of things. And one day when we were having a conversation about something else, you said, oh yeah, by the way, if you just have like 5 sets of 9 for the grid, and then you've got the 5 force things, that's 50 cards. And I was like, he's done the work now. I've got to just do it. I've got no excuse. So, you know, you've had a pour in that. It's a combination of that, having a good idea to start with and trusting that I'm going to be able to sort of navigate to the end of the project and that it's going to work. Because I think that's why some of the stuff that we worked on has been really cool. Teamwork. There we go. Remote high five.
He makes me teamwork 100%. So, Phill, thank you so much. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what. Let Phill know what you thought of the interview. And I'm going to be doing a separate review of both the Elysian duets and the Fusion Mosaic phenomenon. So look out for that video. But do me a favor, go check out Phil's website, buy everything immediately, but also subscribe to the mailing list. Phill is not one of these people that spams you and sends you 15 emails a day. But when he does send you one, it's normally because it's something really cool and it's well worth finding out about. So sign up to the mailing list as well. And yeah, Merry Christmas, Phill. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, dude. It's been really good fun.
No problem. You're amazing. Guys, thank you so much for joining me and Phill on Magic TV. Like I said, go leave a comment down below and I will see you again soon. On behalf of Phill Smith, thanks for checking out the interview. See you again soon.